Okay. We're live with Ben Miller, the owner of WIRTH hats. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I always refer to myself as a co-founder and have since the very start because I really and it was always a weird kind of important thing to me because I always put like, Jacob and Philip were the in a way are the true founders. So I'm just alongside that with them.
Now tell us about WIRTH, spelled WIRTH.
Yeah, WIRTH, not the I sometimes forget it and when I say worth hats, most people think it's with an O, but it is with an I, and that originates from my friend Jacob Worth. So his last name was an I, and that kind of goes in the whole story of Worth, which Jacob, we lost him to suicide in 2014. And so do you want me to go into the whole story, a little bit of the story right now? Yeah, cool.
So sorry, just for
No.
listeners, WIRTH hats is, my understanding of it is, people buy hats and the proceeds from those hats go to get people counseling who might not be able to afford it.
Yeah.
To get them the mental health resources that they need.
Definitely. Yeah. So it's kind of so to date we've sponsored I think just surpassed like the 5,500 counseling sessions sponsored and through the sale of WIRTH hats and yeah, it was kind of stems into the reason why, into the story of neither Jacob nor Philip went and saw a counselor, neither of them reached out, and so we really wanted to kind of like, our whole existence of being in the world for WIRTH is around having an impact, and it's not that's not the secondary thing for us, it's like, and so we wanted to what is the way that we can have the biggest impact, and we wanted to reduce the barriers around counseling and therapy and helping people get the support they need. So number one, yes, we pay for counseling, but even before that we say, which is, I believe arguably, the second part of paying can't happen without the first part, and that's just breaking down the stigma. It's just like people's willingness to go and like talk about it, and I think that involves like just everything that we put out into the world. And I got one of the best this is about 6 months ago, and it was a friend who's pretty established in the Vancouver community as far as in the athletic scene, and he's just a big proponent of mental health. And he was just like, he's like, Ben, people see the counseling session sponsored, and I, that's obviously amazing, but like I just want you to know the impact. There's so much more impact beyond that, and that's just all the conversations you never hear of people willing to go to a counselor or talking about it, or just sharing with their friend that they've something they experienced or something that they want to talk about, or a counselor they want to see or asking. So I think that always means the most to me, and I think that is always what I strive for, and is to like talk about, say, counseling like we talk about going to the physio or whatever it may be. It's not even a thing like, oh yeah, I gotta go to physio. It's like, oh, it's so human. It's like, I gotta go to counselor. And that's whether firm believer of like, whether you're at your best, your worst, everywhere in between. Like I just had a counseling appointment this morning, and it was awesome. Did I need it? Am I in crisis? Absolutely not. But was it great? Was it beneficial? Yeah. Like it was, we talked about some burnout stuff and around like with a colleague, and then and myself of like teetering at times and just looking for signs for myself and being aware. And then we went into some, just did like a really just like getting to my body, relaxing and just trying to like become present, and then talking about some relationship stuff that's going on. So just so valuable, but I didn't need it, but it was so valuable. Like it wasn't like I was in crisis, but it was very much,
it was prophylactic.
Yes.
It was like, let's be proactive rather than reactive with our mental health. And I think that's a great message, because so often when we think of like, I got to go to a counselor or a shrink, I love that one, shrink. It's just like, they're in crisis. It's like, sometimes we wait too late. It's like if you had a broken leg obvious metaphor here. I mean, if you broke your leg, you wouldn't hesitate to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
But we hesitate with these internal fractures.
Yeah.
With our mental health.
For sure. And I think, that what you said there is exactly what, one of the big things we try and do with Worth is just about being proactive with our mental health. Go and see before, and you have to, as a society, we have to, like, it's not, we can't, hopefully soon enough, hopefully it'll never always be like this, but gone are the days where we're not being proactive with our mental health. I know we're not there yet, but it's like, that is, because it is so, when we're falling down, it is, for anyone who's been there, it's, to find that person to talk, to reach out, like, we need to have those things in place. Like, if you're starting to fall, have that counselor that you already know of, that you had built a bit of a relationship with, that you can reach out to and talk to, because we can, a lot of times we'll always fall, no matter what in our life. All of us will fall down at some point. It just depends how far we fall, and it depends how long it takes us to get back up. But if we don't have those things in place, the farther the fall will be, the harder it will be to get back up.
Yeah. And when you fall, you don't want to think about where you're going to reach out.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the hardest thing, because back to the name Worth, and the word worth, WORTH, it's like, when we're in those places, that's when we really struggle to find our worth and our value, because we feel so defeated.
For sure, man. Yeah, 100%.
And that's sort of why you came up with, like, tell me about I know it's probably a difficult story to share, but the genesis of this idea.
Yeah, more than happy to share it. And yeah, so going back to where we started. So I moved from Vancouver to Copenhagen to do my master's in 2013, and during that time, one of my classmates was Jacob. We became friends in those first 6 months, and one day we were outside of class, and he just randomly, this person walked by with his ball cap, and he's like, man, I haven't told many people about this, but I'll share it with you. Like, I really want to start a hat company, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I'm actually in the early stages. I have a couple designs. Like, he just kind of went off about talking about hats, and I was the only one, and I was, pretty grateful that he trust me. And it was a bit of like this, like, thing that he was keeping close to him, because it was kind of an odd thing. Like, we're at a business school, people had, like, this tech idea or this thing, and this, like, hats are hats. It's kind of like a bit of like, what do you just want to do hats? And so since that was, so for a couple months after, at different times we talked about his hat company and different ideas. And I joked with him that I'm like, man, I think your last name would actually be a sweet name. I'm like, there's just so many play on words. And he's like, no, I can't name a company after my, like, name. And he's like, that's just seems a little egotistical. Like, he wasn't that into it. So I was like, fair. So that summer, so in the summer 2014, I went back to Vancouver for the summer. And what I didn't know throughout that whole time, and all the others around him, was that Jacob was struggling. He was depressed, and I got a message in July of 2014 saying, hey Ben, I'm sorry to inform you this, but Jacob is no longer with us. He took his life. And for anyone who's been a part or has experienced something like that, it's one of the more confusing, hard, challenging, weird, emotional things that you can go through. It's just so many different things, and it's fucking tragic, and all of it. It's just so much. And so during this time, my mind is spinning in so many ways. But the only the one thing that was, like, clear, almost like from the start, was, I'm going to help Jacob have his hat company. I'm going to cross this off his bucket list. And, like, just, I want him to have that. He'd talk so much about it, and he's so important. He was so passionate. So that was where Worth Hats started. And Worth Hats was just meant to be a one-off. So I came back, and I did 25 hats for his closest friends and family. I wanted the 25 Worth hats to go to the ones that knew him the best and loved him the most. And each hat had a tag that, I keep right here. And it says in the back of my phone, I say, and so each person of the 25 got a tag. It says, "Worth hats are in memory of Jacob Worth, who passed away last year. Jacob's dream was to create a hat company that people would love. So here's the Worth hats. May these hats serve as a reminder that when going through difficult times, there are always people to reach out to, as we are never alone as we sometimes think we are." And so that was that. I like met his family, and that I gave the hats to his closest 25, and I had my hat, and that's where Worth hats was, supposed to end in a way. It was just like, and I would have everyone, all of those everyone there would have the reminder. And so later that year, I graduated from Copenhagen, from Copenhagen Business School, and then moved back to Vancouver. And during that time, so Philip, who's my master's thesis partner, moved out to Vancouver with me. And there was never anyone I've been like, I probably spent more time with over a given period of time than Philip, like day in, day out, writing a master's thesis, like nonstop. And so, we became incredibly close, and Philip was out here, and we were working on some of the stuff that we had done from our master's thesis. And then he was having some visa issues, and he moved back to Berlin, and we would have weekly calls. And I would one of our weekly calls, he just didn't quite sound right. And I was like, "Hey man, is everything all right?" And he was like, yeah, man, it's good, hesitant. And I just kind of pushed a little bit more, and he, was just like, "Man, to be honest, I've been struggling. It's been really, since moving back, it's been really, really hard." And so from there, we started chatting almost every day. And it seemed like Philip was getting out of it. Like he got a job, and thought he was starting to understand things, and things looked like they were on the up and up. And during that time, I got a new job, and so we went a couple weeks without talking. This was, several months after he had first told me. And what I didn't know is he was still struggling. What I didn't know, he decided to just close down, and he had a plan in place. And so July of 2017, got a message. July 1st of 2017, got a message of, again, that no one ever wants to receive. And it hit me really hard, because it was like, yeah, I never saw it. That was never even still a possibility. I knew Philip was struggling. It was still never a possibility that he would take his life. Like, I'd never even seen that. That was not even a path I even saw. And so it was with that and mourning Philip's loss that about a month later, a common friend who we went to school with, I hadn't really even thought about Worth hats, and he sent an email saying, "Hey Ben, if you have any more of those Worth hats left, I would love to get one, as it serves as a really good reminder. And if you don't and ever decide to make them again, I'll be first on the list to get one." And it was that message that stayed with me for many months after, of just like mourning Philip's death and grieving and trying to make some sense of it. And that email, with the much, much larger societal issue of, mental health and stigma and conversation and getting support, and, the everything that surrounds, the crisis that we have been in and still are in around mental health. And it was with that I decided to put Worth hats back into the world. And so 2018, we did our first pop-up shop at Patagonia in Vancouver, and from there it's just been onwards and upwards, and trying to support and help as many people as we can, and get as many Worth hats onto people's heads as possible. And with the counseling, going back to that, it was, neither Philip or Jacob went and saw someone. Neither of them seek professional help. And Philip would say to me, he's like, "Oh, I'll see someone when I can afford it." He couldn't afford it at the time, and it was always this thing he was pushing off. And so with that, we wanted to have the biggest impact possible, and we wanted to, people to get support. And so that's where we've put our attention, and again, going back to being proactive, helping people and supporting people and encouraging people to be proactive with their mental health.
It's so frustrating that, well, I mean, it's wonderful in Canada we have Medicare,
Yeah.
right? But we don't like. I work as in the school district, and there's like an employee assistance program, and it's like that's the program that you have to use for counseling. Now, I'm very thankful that I get that opportunity. Not most people. Most people don't get that opportunity. But even then, it's like they want you to just use that program, and maybe it's not a good fit for you. Whereas with counseling, so much of it is relational, and finding that relationship, and then you add the money to it. It's like, what's the point, man? Like, I'm going to waste money trying to find that connection. So that's the most frustrating part for me, especially as a counselor myself, right? It's like there's so many people out there that maybe I might be a good fit. You know what I mean? There'd be a mutual fit, but there's a barrier there. And what you're doing with WIRTH is you're trying to break that barrier down so that the mental health resources are more accessible for the people who need them. Right?
Totally, man. Yeah, it is an upward climb to try and, it's like you have this expensive, like, again, so you think of the different levels or different things you have to move through, and we look at them all, as you said, just as barriers. Like, I got to find a counselor. Well, that's hard. And then once I
the
find
average
it,
counselor, $100 an hour.
exactly, yeah, and it's like, and then there's got to be a counselor that I can build a relationship with, and that may not take the first try, may take a couple, and then there's the cost, and then sometimes it can take a bit of time. So there's so many barriers to it, and yet it's such an important integral part of, like, just, I believe, for a functioning society, to be able to have this as an outlet and have this as a resource. And so it's like, how can we reduce those barriers? Because there's
and raise awareness.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Definitely.
I mean, because that, again, like, that sounds like your mission goals is increasing accessibility, raising awareness, because man, growing up as a teenager, I was too tough for counseling. There's this machismo. I can only speak being, a male, right? I'm sure the difficulties are just as difficult. The difficulties are just as intense for anybody else, but I can only speak to my own experiences.
Totally.
So, growing up, you see action figures, they're stoic, right? Yeah. They don't need help. They'll figure it out by themselves. And that's a message that we give to young growing up kids. And then we wonder why we have some of the mental health issues that we have. So totally. How do we combat that? Especially, again, speaking to my experiences for men, because I feel like guys have a hard time talking about things.
Yeah, totally. And again, I think too, it's like, I can relate with everything you said there. And I also think too, people think like, oh, let's say the word vulnerability, but it's like spilling everything you have, and it's like, no, you don't. It's not about, you can choose too who you want to share and share what with, and what you're comfortable sharing with. And it's just like, it's more to, again, trying to work to build that culture where, we're all human. Like, we all, if you haven't,
if Zoom has taught us anything, we're all human. One of the background stuff.
Yeah, like, it's like, and again, it just builds, like, whatever you decide to share. And I think even for, men, sometimes it's like, it builds connection. The closest people you have in your life are usually the ones that you've shared something important with and meaningful with, and vice versa. And the thing is, I always say, when you share something too, you create the space for someone else to share something. Like, sharing is an act of leadership. Like, and again, I go back to like what you decide. And, it's not like you have to spew out. It's just like, maybe I'm having a tough day. It's been
Yeah.
a hard day, as simple as that. But when you say that, you're creating the space for someone else that's okay for them. Like, it has actually a massive impact, I believe. And I, it took leadership from a friend of mine who, this was before I went and saw a counselor. This was before, even this is before Philip passed, so in 2016, 17, maybe early 2007, around there. But it was him who shared with me that he went and saw a counselor. And so this is even after, like, Jacob, I was still like, I'd still have these things of like, and which is of like, oh, should I see someone? Should I not? And yet, like, thinking that it has to be a crisis. Am I in a crisis, or am I, all that stuff? And so it was my friend who's like, he was just like, he's like, Ben, yeah, I'm going to see, my counselor booked this afternoon. He was just so like easy with it in a way.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, and in my head, I was like, wow, I'm like, you see a counselor? I'm like, you're in my head too. I like put him on a pedestal in ways. Like, he's just such an, like, again, I've always looked up to this individual as well. He's an amazing human in so many ways. And I'm just like, it kind of changed the way, but it was his active leadership of just sharing that simple thing that allowed me to, like, oh, well, ask a question. Ask two, like, do you have any contacts? Do you know anyone who's like, oh yeah, and you can try mine. I don't know if it'll be the perfect fit, but my counselor. So I always try and pay that forward. And I'm very like I'll be like, yeah, I have a counseling appointment this afternoon. Like, and it doesn't, it's nice that it actually doesn't even phase me anymore. At first, like, at one point it was like, I have a counseling appointment, you're like kind of like a little nervous about it. Yeah. But it's like, I'm very just open about it. And that doesn't mean I have to go into what the counseling appointment is about or anything like that. But it's just like the fact that I can share it. Like, it's,
you're not trying to dress it up. You're not trying, this is it, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to a counseling appointment.
Yeah.
And that's a great message, right? Because a lot of us, it's like, we all have something, right? We all have something to share, and we all need some place to share it. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but it can be hard to have these difficult conversations with some of our closest friends and family. And that's why a counselor can be very helpful, because it's almost unbiased, right? Like, the hardest people to perform for myself are my family and friends.
For sure.
Because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to have to, be around them now after that. Whereas, you perform for like strangers or something, you're like, oh, that was fine. But with counseling, it's the same thing, right? It's like, it's just good to talk to somebody who's not involved in maybe what it is that you're experiencing.
Totally.
And I think that so much of it is difficult because there's so many unknowns, right? And it's like, you just got to try it.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Yeah, man, you just gotta try it for sure. And yeah, I agree with everything you're saying there.
So you've through WIRTH, you've gotten people 5,500 counseling sessions, were you saying?
Yeah, we sponsored 5,500 plus. Again, we've crossed the 5,500 barrier. I know that much. Yeah.
So every hat sold is like a sponsored counseling session.
No, not every hat.
How does it work?
So it's like, so you have an option. So you make it a 1-for-1 hat, which is more expensive. So, and you can upgrade to more expensive version, and you're paying for a counseling session, or you can buy the classic, classic, which around, our goal is 20% of that goes towards counseling. Sometimes that can be a little give or take, but so that's so you 1-for-1 hat, which you get a 1-for-1 card, says congrats, you paid for someone's counseling session, and then you can buy the classic hat, which goes into the fund of counseling.
Now, where can people pick up one of these hats?
Yeah, so Pretty much all online. So at wirthhats.com. So WIRTHHATS.com. Yeah, we do pickup. So if you're in the Vancouver area, you can always put the pickup option. But we do ship. We've shipped actually to, I think it's getting close to 30 countries, which is always a little goal. I've always had this like thing. I'm like, I know it's an ambition. I'm like, I want everyone in the world to own a Worth hat. And I'm like, and for me, it's like, as long as every country is. So
right. One in every country.
Yeah, one in every country. So we
any to Denmark yet?
Oh yeah. Lots of Denmark. Yeah, lots of Denmark, lots to Europe.
Because that's kind of where this sort of originated, this idea. I mean, it started in Vancouver, but
for sure. And it's interesting. I was talking to someone recently, and they're like, and I kind of forget this sometimes. I'm like, he's like, I love how global Worth is, because it started over, like it was born overseas, and now it's over here, and it's like, so it's, and I'm like, sometimes I almost need a reminder. You're like, yes, we ship everywhere, but it's also, in a way it is. He's like, it's an international brand, and in ways it is, because it did, its birthplace is in, it's in Denmark, it's in Copenhagen, and you could arguably say that its birthplace is even in Austria, which is where Jacob was from. We just, so it's interesting to kind of think about that, and we do, we ship anywhere we can get a Worth hat, we'll try and get it there.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, that message is spreading. How has Worth, has it grown during the pandemic, or how would you say the pandemic has affected your brand?
Yeah, it's impacted in ways. So a lot more when pandemic first hit, it was a very, very large spike in counseling, and that we weren't even prepared for, like the requests, like we had like 1,000% increase. It was quite actually overwhelming, because we weren't ready for it in ways, like our systems weren't quite ready for it. And so it, it had a big impact on us having to try and helping everyone get support. And we're steadily have been growing. And so I guess overall, it's hard to know what it would be like if there wasn't a pandemic, exactly. But like,
yes,
we've
yeah,
but we've steadily grown throughout the pandemic. Yeah.
Right. Now I know you got to get going. So last question for those who are looking to receive counseling and have worries such as not being able to afford it. Mm-hmm. Would they reach out through you, or what are the resources?
Yeah. So no, on the website, you can go to wirthhats.com/counseling, or you can see it on one of the headers on the website, and you just fill out the application. So, it just asks for a few different questions, and then you'll receive an email right away, just kind of letting you know that, you'll get a response within, we try and respond to everyone within 7-ish days. Sometimes a bit less, sometimes a bit more, depending on the amount of people, but we give a variety of resources as well. And two, it's like, that's why when we go back to the proactive thing, like we work to try, and obviously Worth can be a crisis, at times, but we work to try and not make it a crisis.
Yeah.
Like counseling, it's like we want.
And when you are in crisis, this is what you reach out to.
When you are in crisis, we have our resources. We have an amazing resource page, and this is who you reach out to. And there's crisis counselors. Like if you're suicidal, Worth is not who you should be reaching out to.
Call this number, please.
Yeah, call this number. There's different crisis lines. There's different even counseling crisis lines, and like. And then it's like getting back from a little bit from that phase, and then it's like, or even applying for Worth and then reaching out to that, doing what you need to do, and then hopefully getting someone you can talk to that can slowly get you back up on your feet, or whatever stage or level you're at, or you're trying to work through something that you haven't worked through maybe in a while, or it's something you've wanted to look at. There's so many different things, right?
Yeah. Well, man, that's awesome. Ben Miller, a great appetizer. We hope we can get you back on here again. Thank you so much. So Worth hats, What's the email address for that?
Contact@wirthhats.com.
Contact@wirthhats.com. Thank you very much.
Awesome.